everyone, welcome to a new episode for the Filipino Australian Lawyers Association. And thank you, Celia, for joining us today for today's podcast episode. Celia is an academic, a former vice chancellor from UP,
Yes.
a lawyer, a board chair, a mentor, and entrepreneur across her time in the Philippines and also Australia. I believe her journey is a testament to one's career to be multifaceted, multi-layered and often adventurous. To start off, Celia, could you share us more about your background, your school background, and your motivations to practicing law? Yeah.
Sure, yes. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast, by the way, Dan. So my background is, I started out actually in UP as an economics major. But because I had gone to Philippine Science High School, I started missing the sciences a lot. I started missing chemistry and physics. So I went to molecular biology and biotechnology, which at that time was a new course in UP. I'm that old. And then I've always wanted to be a lawyer, and that's why I went into economics as a pre-law course major in the Philippines. But when I went into molecular biology, I then decided to do my PhD in the States on molecular genetics and microbiology. And I got really excited as well about the research I was doing on DNA vaccines. So when I finished my PhD, went back to the Philippines, started my own lab, the DNA vaccine lab in UP, had my own mouse lab, retrofitted from a container van, a 20-foot container van. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was very exciting. But then that wanting to be a lawyer itch just had to be scratched. So I decided to go into law. And at the time, a lot of people were telling me I was crazy. I was pregnant with my third baby. I got admitted to UP Law before I found out I was pregnant with my third baby. And people were telling me, you're crazy, you already have a PhD, you're working full time, you have 3 kids, why would you want to go into law? But as I'm sure a lot of the people who will be listening to this podcast can attest to, it's something that we're passionate about, and it's something that I really wanted to do, even though by that time I was a mature age student. It's something I didn't want to postpone any longer, and just wanted to get into it.
Can you share us more about your law school experience here in Australia and what?
Yes. Okay. So the law school experience. So I didn't have to do the full JD because I was already qualified in the Philippines. So I only had to take the Priestley subjects, which ended up to be like 8 subjects. And what I would do is, and again, a mature age student, because I was already a mature age student in the Philippines 9 years before I did law school here. So what I would do when I every time I enrolled into a new class, I would email my classmates, who among you are also overseas qualified practitioners and really like to get to know you. And we would end up, being group mates and partners in all the group work, anything that required group work, which was really, really good because, by that time we were all professionals, we were all working full time. A lot of us were parents, but we were actually I hate to say this, but we're actually really more productive than a lot of the full-time students. Like, we were meeting deadlines. If we said, have your part ready by Monday, we always had our part ready by Monday. So I guess the way I approached law school here was very, disciplined, because again, it was one of many things I was doing. Raising 3 kids and working full-time. But what I did find, though, is because I had gone to UP Law, which I don't know if you watched Legally Blonde.
Yes.
Legally Blonde, yes,
I think every law student watched that.
Yes. So the way they do the education Legally Blonde in Harvard is the way we do it in UP Law, because UP had copied the Harvard Socratic method. So we would, just spend an entire night sometimes with 2 or 3 students being grilled by the professor. And like Legally Blonde, the professors were really harsh, and they wanted to also get you ready for trial judges who can also be very harsh. So but I think that discipline as well that I got from UP Law, and the confidence was also very helpful.
Yeah. From your transition from your law school experiences, how did you find the experience transitioning to the work naman po? Like in the legal work in Australia?
Yeah. Okay. So that was that took me quite a bit of time, because my first few jobs were law adjacent, so that I would call law adjacent. So my first job at Victoria University, they really liked the fact that I had a law degree and that I was a lawyer in the Philippines. But the other people in the same role, in the equivalent role in the other faculties, were not lawyers. It wasn't really meant to be a lawyer role. But because I was a lawyer, I did a lot of the intellectual property management and the contract review and negotiation. So, but my next job as the SIRO, that was really more closer to law, even though it was still law adjacent. So I was essentially a commercial manager. So I was still doing contract review, contract negotiation, intellectual property. But again, a lot of my equivalents were not lawyers. So it wasn't until really when I got into Melbourne Uni, when I led the research contracts team at University of Melbourne, that we weren't part of the legal team, but we were like a satellite of the legal team. In fact, the legal team wanted us to handle more of the research contracts so that they could focus on the other legal matters that they had to work on. So that was we were like a satellite legal office of Melbourne University, specific for research. So I suppose in a way I gradually transitioned then to a more legal practice. I didn't end up working for a law firm because that would have meant, that I would have had to take a pay cut and have a mortgage and 3 kids. So I was always going for those roles where they're very legally focused, but not in law firms. So it was in-house, more in-house legal. And then after Melbourne Uni, all my other roles were very much, I was hired as a lawyer. And and the other people doing the same role as me in those organizations were also lawyers. But now my current role is my first role in a law firm, but it's a legal consulting firm, and I was hired as a special counsel. So I didn't have to start from associate entry level. Everyone in that firm were hired based on their years of experience. So, and that was a really lucky break for me, because because I've always thought that if I want to work in a law firm, I would have to start from associate. And it was so lucky that they rang from out of the blue.
Could you share us some about your multicultural initiatives and your mentoring?
Oh, thank you for your opportunity to share about that. Yes. So in my background, you see the career transformation ventures. So I formed that in, I think, 22 or 23, because I'd been mentoring a lot of people when I was still with one of my employers, where they had this huge volunteer program. So I had mentored a lot of people through there, and I was leaving them, and I thought, I can continue mentoring, but maybe under my own banner, and it's not prohibitively priced. It's very, very accessible. It's much cheaper than a lot of other professional mentors that you can find, but it's not free the way I used to do it, because obviously I have costs. So but it doesn't really cover my costs. The price. It's a labor of love. And I really focus on multicultural mentees. So all of not all, I have had mentees who weren't what you might call marginal or culturally marginalized, or even CALD, culturally and linguistically diverse, but very, very few. So most of my mentees have been Filipinos, have been Colombian, Venezuelan, from Afghanistan. So they're from all over the world. And a lot of them have been women. So although I've mentored men as well, a big majority have been women. And the idea is that I really want to empower these people from multicultural and what you might call disadvantaged or less privileged backgrounds, and especially with migrants. I think it's really important. It's very hard for migrants to succeed and advance in Australia. Very different from the States. Like I was just telling my husband the other day, if we had stayed in the States, we'd be, doing this and that, be like this. And when I see my peers who stayed in the States, who went to the States, it's just very, very different. It's just so much harder for us here in Australia from migrant, and especially from a multicultural background. So whatever I've learned, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've also, done quite a few things right, and I've also had luck. But whatever I've learned, I'm happy to share, and I really want to share. And when I see my mentee succeeding and getting promoted or getting the job that they really, really wanted while I was mentoring them, it just really fills me. This is what I want to do. I wish I could get paid for it, but so I do it on the side because this is what I really love to do. But it's not something that would support my family.
More about for your work experience, transitioning into those cultures.
Which is why we wanted to really come back to a Western country, is that I guess it's less hierarchical as well. It's also very much merit-based, right? Compared to the Philippines, Philippines, you always say it's who you know. It's a big thing. It's not just cronyism. It's just networking. Which is also important here. Networking is also important here, but it has a much bigger
weight.
Weight in the Philippines, right, than in the States. And it's true, of course, everywhere. That's also who you know. But someone who doesn't know anyone can still advance. For example, in my roles here in Australia, I've never gotten a role because of who I knew. So even when I've used my networks, I always ended up getting a role where I didn't use my networks. So it's but I always mentor, of course, and say that you need networks because you do. But sometimes it's just the way that it happens, that the better role you get is actually the one that you didn't get through your network. So
do you have any advice for young aspiring lawyers or law students who thinking of studying to Australia, and also for Filipino lawyers from your experiences wanting to requalify here as a lawyer in Australia? What are your advice to them?
Get to know what the community needs, because I think the big difference between a mature age lawyer and a law student who comes into law straight from maybe high school or undergrad is that sometimes they don't really know yet what the community needs and what they want to do for the community. The big advantage of mature age students I've seen is that we tend to know already what we want to do, and we tend to have a better idea of how what we want to do fits in with what the community needs. So, but you don't have to be a mature age student to know that, right? That's why a lot of American students do a lot of volunteering and seeing the world. They take gap years to do that. Australians also tend to do that, but more of like to go on a break, like my kids have to travel and go on a break. But if you use that gap year, at least some of it, to actually get to know the people who you might be wanting to serve, I think that would really enrich your studies. Because just studying law on its own, thinking you want to be a lawyer, I feel might not be enough a motivation, especially when you're having it tough. But if you have and this is again my philosophy when I'm mentoring, if you have a strategic vision, a big picture view of why you want to become a lawyer, then when something tough happens, it's easier for you to well, not easier for you, but you can fight through it because you remember, right, the why, the big why am I doing this? And it's a much better why if you actually have seen more of the world than if you just come straight from high school or come straight from undergraduate school, unless you've already seen the world and your community through your lived experience. But if you haven't, then getting that lived experience will make a big difference.
The final note, do you have any invitations to any events or initiatives that you might have that you want people to engage in? Yeah.
So right now, I don't have any specific date for anything, but I would like to do some CPD courses for lawyers on certain topics relating to commercial law and intellectual property. And then I hope to be planning an executive training session, if not this year, next year, under career transformation ventures. And I really encourage people to I give very practical tips, very practical advice on how to speak to your manager about something you really want to do, whether it's a project or getting promoted, and how to talk to board members or board directors if you're in, and talk to C-suite executives. Very practical tips. So.
Thank you for that invitation, and thank you, Celia, for joining us today for today's podcast episode. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne.